Welcome to Make the Grade with the Success Doctor, Steven Greene, where you'll discover actionable strategies to help your student to reach their academic goals, to excel at standardized testing, and to plan for the college admissions process painlessly. And now, here's your host, Dr. Steven Greene.
Dr. Steven Greene here, the Success Doctor. This is part 2 of a series recorded for the Educational Review entitled Studying for Success. And welcome and thank you for listening. In part 1, talked about time management techniques, the importance of managing time successfully, and some techniques to do that. In this episode, I'm going to talk about information management techniques, how to manage information. So the first question would be simply, why is this important? Why do you need to manage information to be successful? I think the obvious answer is because that's kind of your job in school, is to take information, process it, prioritize it, decide what's important, or maybe be told what's important by an instructor, and then be able to recall it or apply it when it comes time for some sort of assessment. The challenges are sometimes the complexity of that information, but more often, at least in my caseload, is volume. Just the sheer volume of having to deal with 4 or 5 or sometimes more classes, and the particular amount of information that each one of these classes generates requires a student to be organized and requires a student to effectively manage all this information. Sometimes it's deadline based. There may be information you have to process and do by a certain day. So the teacher might say, well, we need you to read this chapter of this book and annotate it or outline it and have that ready for a discussion tomorrow. Sometimes it may be taking notes in class. So the teacher would be lecturing and the student would need to listen, take notes, organize, things like that. But to me, the importance of having an information management system for success is critical. So the idea would be, how do you do this? What's necessary to do this? And I think this comes into 2 possible answers. One is the old school system. For many years, like when I was in school, we had notebooks, we had diaries, we had pen and paper and pencils, and we wrote everything down. And it was typically organized by the date. So whatever you did in school that day, that was how we took notes. Most likely, or at least in a lot of cases, we could have multiple notebooks. So maybe we had a math notebook and a science notebook and such and such. But the point was things were written down. Any supplemental materials like handouts a teacher would give, or things like this would be incorporated into that process. Over the last few years, and certainly recently, I would say 99% of my caseload of students are using cloud-based solutions for this. Google has a very popular system. There's many other ones, but the Google Cloud, Google Docs, Google Sheets seems to be, at least in my caseload, predominant. And the beauty of this is, it is assuming you can type, you can take notes on there. The nice thing is you can also scan and have documents in there. You can annotate the documents. You can have access to videos, pictures. It really becomes a multi-dimensional system as opposed to just, I shouldn't say just because it's effective, writing things down. The other really nice thing about the cloud-based systems is the ability to share and collaborate. So I have several students who I work with, in fact, almost everyone at some point, where we'll have an information and time management system that's on a cloud-based solution, and they can give me access to it as a co-user or administrator or whatever, and I can actually see what they're doing, make comments, make sure they're on track, things like this. And this is really important for a student's success over time. But the basic tools you need can be as simple as a paper and a pad, and as complicated and as robust as a cloud-based solution. The most important thing to me, and my advice to everyone, is to find something that you're comfortable with, find something you can handle effectively every single time you need to use it. So the question would be, what do we do with all this information? How do you manage it? And I think the answer to that can again vary student to student. It can also vary depending on what classes they have, because different academic classes are going to have different needs. The way you would take notes and the way you would process information in a math class is going to be very different than in a history class, just by the nature of the information. But the key is, and I use this word a lot, is consistency. However you're going to keep track of this, Monday should be the same way as Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. So here's some suggestions. Number one would be date everything. And I might have said this in the time management technique episode because it's so important and it's so easy. But so date everything. That way there's a chronological consistency there. Another simple technique is to color code things. And this can be done online in cloud-based as well. You can just have the text different colors or put different things in there. You can also make sure that you refer one thing to another. You may have a note-taking section in your book and a place where quizzes are and things like this. And you want to make sure that everything is cataloged in a way that it can be accessed and retrieved. It's very frustrating when you take notes or you make an outline or you have a handout from class and then it comes time to study for an exam and you don't have access to it. You don't know where it is or you don't know where you put it. So this is important. And so to bring it kind of together, the importance of having a system is to kind of make it through your schoolwork or your academia. And as an aside, even in the business world or the entrepreneurial world, these are really important things. You have to have a way to do it that works for you, whether it's pen and paper or cloud-based. And the key is consistency. And the day-to-day level is being able to take the information and catalog it in a way that makes sense to you, then be able to retrieve it when you need it. So let me talk for a second about different styles of information management. So the biggest split I see would be the difference between live note-taking, in other words, taking notes while a teacher would be lecturing, versus taking notes at home, which I typically call outlining, just to distinguish between them. So to be clear, note-taking would happen live. A teacher is networking. A teacher is lecturing and a teacher is talking and maybe there's a PowerPoint on the screen or what have you. And the student would need to take notes to complement what's going on in the class or maybe completely record what's going on in the class. There's particular challenges to that because it's difficult sometimes to listen and take notes simultaneously. Contrasting that would be recording information in an asynchronous setting at home, in a library, wherever a student happens to be doing homework. That's more of outlining, abstracting, concept mapping, things like that. And these are all different techniques that can be used to manage information. One thing you want to avoid is duplication of effort. I've seen students where they'll get notes in class and then they'll go home and rewrite them, or they'll go home and retype them, or they'll go make an outline and the outline's 80% the same as their class notes. That's inefficient. Again, that carries over into time management because these things really are inseparable. But you want to know what you already have and use that as a point and as a basis of what you also have to do. In the end, let's ask a simple question. What's the purpose of all this in school for a student? Is to help the student understand the information, and the metric for that almost all the time is grades. And grades are typically based on exams or tests or quizzes or papers or some sort of analysis that way. And that's most often an ability of a student to show that they recall or they can utilize or they can apply the information that they've learned in the class that they reinforce on their own. So the information management system is designed completely to facilitate that happening. In closing, I want to tell a quick story. I had a student and as a case study who did very, very well in classes that they didn't have to take a whole lot of notes. In this student's case, it was math. Very strong math student because it was primarily formulas and math techniques like factoring and what have you. Didn't do well at all, paradoxically, really, in classes that had lots of volume, history, English mostly. And of course, this was a big concern to the parents and to the teachers. And they brought them to me, and it really didn't take long to figure out what the challenge was. The notes for the history and the English class were almost non-existent. And the student said, well, I don't like to take notes during class because I just like to listen. I feel like if I'm not listening, I'm not understanding. So there was an inherent challenge here of that conflict. If they didn't listen and took notes, maybe they were going to miss something. And if they only listened and didn't take notes, they were going to miss something. But unfortunately, the results weren't there either way. So the system I put in place here was a preview. So I said to the student, okay, let's talk about what's going to go on in history tomorrow. You're learning about whatever event. So the night before, you need to preview that, take a look at it, maybe abstract it, maybe outline it, take some notes ahead of time. That way, when you go into the class the next day, you already have them in front of you, and you can just supplement them with information or ideas that the teacher is talking about. So I want to dispel the concept that note-taking and outlining only happens after the fact. And I don't think that this is any great revolutionary idea, but most students are not thinking this way. So these are some ideas. The theme here today is managing information for success, which dovetails completely with time management for success. And the two of them together create a study system to study for success, which is the goal we want for all of our students. So Dr. Steven Greene, the Success Doctor. My website is makethegrade.net, makethegrade.net. You can also try to look up the Make the Grade podcast on all the platforms. You can find me personally on Facebook and Instagram at Make the Grade. Really appreciate you listening and love any feedback that you have. Thank you, everyone. And I will be back at you with episode 3. Thank you.
You've been listening to Make the Grade with the Success Doctor, Steven Greene. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe. For more resources and support, please visit makethegrade.net.